When I arrived at my son's law school honors reception, the door attendant directed me to the kitchen. "Catering staff, this way," he said. I could have flashed my federal judge credentials, but when I overheard my son's girlfriend's father say, "Keep that cleaning lady away from the Supreme Court justices," I decided to let them learn the hard way. After all, I didn't become the youngest federal judge in history by showing my cards too early. Before we see how Gregory handles the worst mistake of his life, I am curious, what time is it where you are right now? Drop a comment with your city and time. I want to see how global our justice-seeking family is today. I stepped into the catering area, and the temperature immediately spiked 10 degrees. Steam from the warming ovens mixed with the metallic scent of sternos and the sharp tang of citrus cleaner. This wasn't the polished, marble-floored reception hall. This was the engine room, chaotic and invisible. A man in a stained white coat, clearly the head caterer, barked orders into a headset while servers rushed past him, balancing precarious towers of glassware. He spotted me standing by the door in my modest navy suit and pearl earrings. "About time," he snapped, not even looking at my face. "Grab an apron. We're short 2 runners." Before I could correct him, the double doors swung open and Gregory Harrington stormed in. I recognized him instantly from the photos my son, Andrew, had shown me, though in those pictures, he was smiling. Here, in the back of the house, his face was contorted with stress. He was a large man who wore his bespoke Italian suit-like armor, designed to deflect anything beneath his station. Right now, he was panicking about champagne distribution. "This is unacceptable," he was saying to no one in particular, his voice booming over the kitchen noise. "My guests have been waiting 5 minutes for a refill. 5 minutes!" His eyes scanned the room, landing on me. He didn't see a federal judge. He saw a body in a suit that wasn't a tuxedo, standing idle. He marched over, grabbed a silver tray loaded with crystal flutes from a nearby table, and physically thrust it into my hands. The metal was cold and heavy against my palms. "Look alive!" he snapped, his fingers clicking in front of my face. "Circulate the back room and try to smile. You're getting paid to be pleasant." I froze. My first instinct was to drop the tray, to straighten my spine, flash my badge, and watch the color drain from his face as I introduced myself as the Honorable Angela Sterling. It would be easy. It would be satisfying. But as I looked into his eyes, glazed over with entitlement and panic, I realized it would be too fast. He would apologize, sweat a little, and then go back to his evening, rewriting the narrative to make himself the victim of a simple misunderstanding. No, that wasn't justice. That was just a correction. I looked down at the tray, then back up at him. "Of course, sir," I said, my voice smooth and practiced. I adjusted my grip on the silver handles. I made a choice in that split second. I would take the tray. I would walk into that room not as his equal, but as his servant. Because the help hears everything. The help is invisible. And invisibility is the most dangerous weapon a judge can wield outside her courtroom. I turned and walked through the swinging doors, leaving the steam and the shouting behind, ready to serve Gregory Harrington exactly what he deserved. I pushed through the swinging doors and entered the ballroom. The transition was jarring. The humid, frantic energy of the kitchen instantly vanished, replaced by the hushed, climate-controlled murmur of the Harvard Law School gala. The air smelled of expensive perfume, old money, and the faint, dusty scent of history that seemed to seep from the oak-paneled walls. I adjusted the heavy silver tray on my shoulder, feeling the cold metal bite into my palm. I began to circulate. It was a fascinating sociological experiment. I moved through clusters of partners, associates, and judges, people who would normally stand when I entered a room, and I became utterly invisible. I was no longer Angela Sterling. I was a delivery mechanism for champagne. Hands reached out to take flutes from my tray without eyes ever meeting mine. Conversations didn't pause. I was furniture. I was less than furniture. I was a utility. Then I saw Andrew. My son was standing near the orchestra, looking handsome and anxious in his new suit. He was scanning the room, his eyes darting from the entrance to the VIP tables, clearly looking for his mother. His gaze swept over me, moved past, and then snapped back. The color drained from his face. His eyes widened in absolute horror as he processed the image. His mother, a federal judge, serving drinks to the people who were supposed to be his peers. He took a step forward, his mouth opening to call out, to rush over and take the tray from my hands. I caught his eye and gave a sharp, almost imperceptible shake of my head. Stop. I projected the command with the same intensity I used from the bench. Do not move. Do not speak. He froze, torn between filial duty and the recognition of that look. He knew that look. It meant I had a plan. It meant the gavel was raised, and he needed to let it fall. He swallowed hard, nodded once, and stayed put. Good boy. I turned away, continuing my rounds. The weight of the tray was familiar, a ghost sensation from a lifetime ago. 25 years ago, I didn't wear tailored suits. I wore gray coveralls. I worked the night shift at the county courthouse to pay for my undergraduate degree. I remembered the smell of industrial bleach and the way the floor wax would chap my hands until they bled in the winter. I remembered studying for the LSATs in the supply closet during my 15-minute breaks, using a flashlight so the security guards wouldn't see the light under the door. I shifted the tray to my other hand, my fingers brushing against the simple pearl earrings I wore. I bought them the day I passed the bar exam. They weren't expensive, but they were the first thing I owned that wasn't secondhand. They were my reminder. Gregory Harrington and his kind believed that power was inherited, that dignity was something you bought with a trust fund. They didn't understand the dignity of dirty hands. They didn't understand that the hand that holds the mop understands justice far better than the hand that has only ever held a silver spoon. Because when you scrub the floors, you see the dirt everyone else tries to hide. You see the cracks in the foundation. I wasn't ashamed to be holding this tray. I was proud. It proved I could survive in their world while they wouldn't last 5 minutes in mine. My silence wasn't submission. It was an evidence-gathering mission. And as I approached the center of the room, where Gregory was holding court, I prepared to collect the final exhibits for the prosecution. I made my way toward the high-top table where Gregory and Stephanie Harrington were holding court. Gregory was in his element, gesturing broadly with a crystal flute, his laughter a performative boom designed to draw attention. Stephanie stood beside him, a statue in beige silk, her smile tight and practiced. Next to them was Ashley, wearing a dress that cost more than my first car, looking bored and scrolling on her phone. As I approached, Gregory didn't even look up. He extended his empty glass toward me without breaking eye contact with the man he was talking to. Another round, he said, his voice dismissive, and make sure it's chilled this time. The last bottle was lukewarm. I took the glass, fighting the urge to crush it in my hand. I poured the champagne, careful not to spill a drop. As I filled Stephanie's glass, Gregory continued his monologue. This antitrust suit against Biocorp is going to be a landmark case, he declared, puffing out his chest. 120 million on the line. And frankly, the opposition doesn't stand a chance. Their legal team is green. He took a sip of his wine, barely acknowledging my presence. The only wild card is the judge, he continued, a sneer curling his lip. They assigned that new female judge to the case. Sterling. Some diversity hire from the Bronx? Probably got the seat because she checked the right boxes. I froze. My hand hovered over Ashley's glass. He was talking about me. He was standing 3 feet away from the woman who would be presiding over his case on Monday morning, and he was dismissing me as a token appointment. He didn't see the woman pouring his wine. He didn't see the intelligence in my eyes, the years of hard work etched into my face. He saw a uniform. He saw a function. This was status blindness. It was a psychological phenomenon I'd observed countless times from the bench. Powerful people often developed a selective blindness toward those they deemed beneath them. It wasn't just arrogance, it was a cognitive failure. They literally couldn't process the humanity of someone in a service role. To Gregory, I wasn't a person with a history, an education, or power. I was a champagne dispenser, and that blindness was his fatal flaw. Ashley looked up from her phone, her eyes scanning the room. "Where is Andrew's mother?" she asked, her voice dripping with annoyance. He said she was coming. "Do you think she got lost looking for the free buffet? Or maybe she's underdressed and the doorman wouldn't let her in." Stephanie laughed, a cruel tinkling sound. "Oh, stop it, Ashley." Although, knowing her background, she probably showed up in polyester. I finished pouring Ashley's glass, my face a mask of polite indifference. Inside, I was burning, but I didn't say a word. I simply stepped back, blending into the shadows, and let them dig their own graves. Every word they spoke, every insult they hurled, was another nail in their coffin. And I was collecting them all. A hush fell over the room, starting from the entrance and rippling outward like a wave. The clinking of glasses ceased. The low hum of conversation evaporated. Gregory stopped mid-sentence, his glass half raised to his lips. All eyes turned toward the double doors. Senator Thomas had arrived. He was a legend in legal circles, a man who had shaped policy for 3 decades and whose endorsement could make or break a career. He stood in the doorway, flanked by his security detail, scanning the room with sharp, intelligent eyes. He wasn't looking at the opulent floral arrangements or the architecture. He was looking for someone. Gregory immediately straightened his posture, buttoning his jacket with a nervous twitch. He flashed a triumphant smile at Stephanie. "Showtime," he murmured. This was the moment he'd been waiting for, the opportunity to cement his firm status by securing a photo op with the senator. He stepped forward, hand extended, ready to intercept the VIP. "Senator Thomas," Gregory boomed, his voice projecting across the silent room. "An honor to have you. Gregory Harrington, managing partner of Harrington and Associates. We're so pleased you could." Senator Thomas didn't even slow down. He looked right through Gregory as if he were a ghost, his gaze fixed on a point at the back of the room. He walked past the line of eager partners, past the trembling associates, past the table where Ashley sat frozen with her mouth slightly open. He walked straight toward me. I stood near the service entrance, still holding the empty silver tray, my back straight, my expression neutral. The senator stopped 3 feet away. A slow smile spread across his face. "Well," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the dead silence, "I was told the legal eagle of the Second Circuit was attending, but I didn't expect to find her hiding in the back." He stepped forward and embraced me warmly, ignoring the tray in my hand. "It's good to see you, Angela. Or should I say, Your Honor." The sound of the silver tray hitting the table was deafening in the silence. It clattered and spun, a jarring metallic note that seemed to echo endlessly. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The server persona vanished. My posture shifted, settling into the authority I wore every day on the bench. I smiled at the senator. "It's good to see you too, Marcus. Though I admit, the service here is a little understaffed." The senator laughed, a genuine, hearty sound. Always the multitasker. "But I think you can retire the tray for the evening." I turned slowly to face the room. Every eye was on me. Andrew was grinning openly now, his earlier anxiety replaced by pure, unadulterated pride. But my gaze went past him, straight to the high-top table where the Harringtons stood frozen in a tableau of absolute shock. Gregory's face was a mask of horror. The blood had drained completely from his skin, leaving him a sickly shade of gray. His hand was still extended in the air, greeting a ghost. Ashley looked like she might be sick. Stephanie's hand was clamped over her mouth. I walked toward them. The crowd parted instantly, creating a wide path. I didn't hurry. I moved with the measured pace of a judge entering her courtroom. When I reached their table, I stopped. "Mr. Harrington," I said, my voice calm, leveled, and lethal. "I believe we haven't been properly introduced." I extended my hand. He stared at it, unable to move. "I am Angela Sterling, Andrew's mother. And as you so eloquently pointed out earlier, the diversity hire who will be presiding over State versus Harrington Corp. On Monday morning." I paused, letting the words hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. "I suggest you spend the weekend preparing your opening statement, counselor. Because judging by your performance tonight, your judgment is severely lacking." Gregory made a choking sound. His knees seemed to give way, and he grabbed the edge of the table to steady himself. It was done. The verdict was in, and the sentence was just beginning. The silence that followed my introduction was heavy enough to crush a man, and judging by Gregory's posture, it was doing exactly that. He looked like he had been struck by a physical blow. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The arrogance that had fueled him all evening, the certainty that he was the most important person in the room, had evaporated, leaving behind a terrified man in an expensive suit. He knew exactly what this meant. He knew that judges talk. He knew that his behavior tonight, the snapping fingers, the dismissal, the blatant disrespect, wouldn't just stay in this ballroom. It would become a legend in the courthouses of the Second Circuit. Your Honor, he finally stammered, his voice a dry husk. I had no idea. It was a misunderstanding. The uniform, the tray. The uniform, I repeated, my voice cool. Yes, you saw a uniform, so you stopped seeing a person. That is precisely the problem, Mr. Harrington. And it is a dangerous blind spot for a man managing a $120 million antitrust lawsuit. If you cannot identify the power dynamics in a catering hall, how can I trust your judgment in a federal courtroom? Ashley, who had been staring at me with wide, horrified eyes, suddenly stepped forward. Her survival instincts kicked in. She reached out, trying to touch my arm, but stopped short when I raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Sterling. Judge Sterling, she said, her voice trembling. We didn't know. Andrew never told us who you were. If you had known I had power, you would have treated me with respect. I finished for her. That is not integrity, Ashley. That is strategy, and it is a poor one. I turned my body fully toward her. The father was a lost cause, a dinosaur of a bygone era, but the daughter, she was just beginning her career. And I had one final verdict to deliver. Speaking of knowing things, I said, my tone shifting from judicial to conversational, which was far more terrifying. I reviewed the final candidates for the Angela Sterling Legal Fellowship this morning. Ashley froze. The color drained from her face faster than it had from her father's. The Sterling Fellowship was one of the most prestigious grants in the country. It provided full tuition for the final year of law school and a guaranteed clerkship. It was her dream. She had talked about it incessantly to Andrew. I saw your application, I continued. Your grades are impeccable. Your essay on the ethics of modern law was well written. I paused, letting the hope flicker in her eyes for just a second before extinguishing it. But the fellowship isn't just about grades. I founded it to support students who understand the weight of the law, who understand that dignity isn't conditional. I looked at the terrified girl in the $3,600 dress. I was looking for character, Ashley. I think we both know my decision. She burst into tears. It wasn't a graceful cry. It was the ugly, sobbing realization that her entitlement had just cost her the future she thought she was owed. Gregory looked from his weeping daughter to me, realizing that his arrogance had just become her inheritance. The power flip was complete. The server held the gavel, and the masters were on their knees. I could have ended it there. I could have walked away, left them in the ruins of their social standing, and watched from a distance as Gregory scrambled to find new counsel and Ashley learned to live with rejection. It would have been justified. It would have been the revenge they expected. But destruction is easy. Justice is harder. Justice requires construction. However, I said, cutting through Ashley's sobs, the room went quiet again. I am a believer in rehabilitation. I turned to Gregory. I will be recusing myself from State versus Harrington Corp. First thing Monday morning. Unlike you, I do not allow personal feelings to compromise my professional ethics. You will get a new judge. Whether they are as lenient as I might have been, well, that is a gamble you will have to take. He nodded rapidly, looking like a man who had just been granted a stay of execution. Then I looked at Ashley. As for you, the fellowship is gone. Do not apply again. However, there is an opening in the public defender's office. It is an unpaid internship. It involves long hours, difficult clients, and very little glamour. You will be organizing files, fetching coffee, And perhaps, if you are humble enough, learning how the law actually works for people who cannot afford $3,000 dresses. She looked up, wiping her eyes. An internship? If you survive 6 months, I said. If you show up on time, do the work, and treat every single person in that office, from the clients to the janitorial staff, with the respect they deserve. Then, and only then, will I write you a recommendation for your clerkship applications. It wasn't a gift. It was a sentence to hard labor. It was an invitation to the world of dirty hands that had made me who I am. The choice is yours, I said. I didn't wait for an answer. I turned to Senator Thomas, who was watching with a look of profound amusement. Marcus, I believe you promised to buy me a drink. I'm officially off the clock. I walked out of the ballroom with my son and the senator, leaving the Harringtons standing in the wreckage of their ego. I touched my pearl earrings one last time. They felt lighter. 6 months later, I stopped by the public defender's office. I didn't go in. I just looked through the glass partition. There, in the back corner, wearing a simple blouse and comfortable shoes, was Ashley. She was carrying a stack of files in one hand and a tray of coffees in the other. She stopped to hold the door open for a man in a custodian's uniform, smiling at him and saying something that made him laugh. She hadn't just learned a lesson. She was becoming a person. I smiled and walked away. The verdict had been delivered, the sentence served, and justice, true, constructive justice, had been done. Angela taught them that dignity isn't what you wear, it's how you treat people when you think no one is watching. If you believe respect should be the first requirement for success, hit that share button. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by someone who didn't know who you really were?